What if the NBA's most beloved superstar is quietly battling an invisible enemy that's turning him into the league's most dangerous villain? Today we're diving into Tyrese Haliburton's shocking transformation from basketball's golden boy to a cold, calculated destroyer. We'll uncover the hidden breakdown that nearly ended his career and how his mental collapse became the foundation for his ruthless domination of the Knicks. You'll understand why Haliburton's all-black outfits represent something far more disturbing than confidence. What we discovered about his mental state will change how you see every game he plays. But before we reveal the chilling truth behind Haliburton's transformation, you have to see the moment that made the entire basketball world realize something fundamental had shifted.
And Tyrese Haliburton walked into the arena wearing all black like he was attending a funeral.
This wasn't a fashion statement or some calculated media move designed to generate headlines. The man who once smiled his way through every interview, who celebrated teammates' success with infectious joy that seemed impossible to manufacture, was now dressed like the Grim Reaper coming to collect souls. The contrast was jarring for anyone who had followed his career from the beginning. He threw up the choking sign, the same gesture Reggie Miller used to torture the Knicks in the 1990s, turning Madison Square Garden into his personal playground of psychological warfare. But this wasn't Reggie's theatrical showmanship, complete with dramatic flair and obvious enjoyment of the moment. This was something much colder, much more calculated,
delivered with the emotional detachment of someone performing surgery, rather than celebrating a clutch shot.
And here's what makes it terrifying. Just months before this moment,
NBA players had voted him the most overrated player in the league.
But the man who walked into that elimination game wearing funeral attire and delivering cold-blooded psychological warfare, he wasn't the same person who got those votes.
He was someone else entirely. Someone who had learned to transform public humiliation and internal breakdown into competitive fuel. More potent than anything the league had seen since Michael Jordan's most ruthless years.
To understand just how dramatic this transformation really is, you have to remember who Tyrese Haliburton used to be. He built his entire brand on infectious joy that seemed impossible to fake. Even in an era where every player has media training and calculated public personas, he was the antithesis of the modern NBA villain. A genuine burst of positivity who made fans believe basketball was still fun in an era dominated by manufactured drama, social media controversies, and carefully crafted image management. His celebrations were spontaneous eruptions of pure happiness, not choreographed moments designed for viral content. His energy was authentic in a way that made veteran observers wonder
if he had somehow avoided the cynicism that typically develops in professional athletes by their mid-20s.
During interviews, he would light up discussing basketball strategy, genuinely excited about the nuances of pick and roll execution, defensive rotations, and team chemistry in ways that made reporters remember why they fell in love with covering the sport in the first place.
His teammates gravitated toward his positivity like moths to a flame.
And opposing players respected his genuine approach to competition even when they were trying to destroy him on the court. But being voted most overrated by his peers just before the playoffs, that hit different than any media criticism or fan trolling he had experienced. This wasn't some hot take artist looking for clicks or random people on Twitter questioning his abilities. This was his fellow professionals, the players he competed against every night, the ones whose respect he valued most,
saying he wasn't as good as everyone thought.
What fans didn't see was happening back in Indianapolis, where Haliburton was experiencing what he later described as significant mental struggles that threatened to undermine everything he had built since his college days at Iowa State. These weren't the typical growing pains of a young player adjusting to increased expectations or dealing with a shooting slump that every NBA player experiences at some point in their career. In his own words, from The Athletic's exclusive interview that pulled back the curtain on his psychological state, he revealed he was struggling to look at himself in the mirror and dealing with what he called real self-doubt that consumed his thoughts both on and off the basketball court. This was a player who had always prided himself on mental toughness and emotional stability. Someone who had navigated the transition from college to professional basketball with apparent ease, suddenly finding himself unable to perform the most basic acts of self-care and personal maintenance. He described avoiding practice sessions, the very environment that had always been his sanctuary and source of confidence, because the thought of potentially struggling struggling in front of his teammates had become overwhelming. The struggles affected more than just his statistics and on-court production. They seeped into his daily routine and mindset like a poison that contaminated every aspect of his life.
But here's where the story takes its most disturbing turn.
Instead of seeking help or taking time away from the game to address his mental health, Haliburton chose a different path.
One that would transform his mental collapse into the most effective psychological weapon the NBA has seen since Michael Jordan's peak.
On that block, no less. Slight difference, game clock, shot clock. Haliburton to the rim. 4 seconds. Haliburton for the lead. Will try to cash in. Oh, what a pass.
When the playoffs began, something fundamental shifted in Haliburton's approach to basketball and life itself. The player who once wore his emotions openly was now channeling those overrated votes, that self-doubt,
that internal breakdown into pure competitive fury.
The transformation wasn't gradual or subtle, it was sudden and complete, as if someone had flipped a switch in his personality and activated a defense mechanism that turned psychological trauma into competitive advantage. The same mental struggles that had nearly broken him became the fuel for a level of focused intensity that made veteran observers wonder if they were watching the birth of a new type of NBA villain. The all-black outfits he began wearing before elimination games weren't fashion statements designed to generate social media buzz or create memorable images for highlight reels. When Ben Stiller, the comedian and noted Knicks fan, tweeted about his funeral outfit and called it out as psychological warfare, Haliburton's response wasn't defensive or explanatory. It was dismissive and cold, delivered with the emotional detachment of someone who had learned to view criticism
as background noise,
rather than something worthy of consideration or response.
His silent stares during pregame warm-ups
and calculated taunts during gameplay weren't confidence or mental toughness. They were the external manifestation of internal numbness, a coping mechanism that had evolved into a weapon more effective than any trash talk or physical intimidation. Here's the truth that makes Haliburton's transformation so fundamentally chilling. Reggie Miller's legendary battles with the Knicks were built on showmanship, genuine emotion, and a deep love for the theatrical aspects of professional basketball. Miller fed off crowd energy like a performer feeding off applause, transforming boos into fuel for spectacular performances. His choking gestures and finger-wagging celebrations were designed to entertain as much as intimidate, carefully crafted moments of theater that elevated the drama of professional basketball to levels that transcended the sport itself. Haliburton's approach represents something far more psychologically disturbing and potentially dangerous for the future of competitive basketball.
His borrowed Miller celebrations aren't homages to basketball legends.
They're the desperate attempts of someone trying to feel something, anything, through mimicry of players who actually experience joy during their greatest moments. This new version of Haliburton doesn't feed off crowd energy because he's emotionally disconnected from the game itself, operating from a place of numbness that makes every victory feel calculated rather than earned.
Haliburton's transformation
reflects a crisis that the NBA's leadership refuses to acknowledge publicly, even as more players speak openly about mental health struggles and the hidden costs of modern professional basketball stardom. In an era where social media scrutiny is constant, performance expectations are impossibly high, and every mistake is dissected by millions of strangers with internet access, even the most naturally positive personalities are breaking in ways that previous generations of players never experienced. The fact that he can now laugh at being voted most overrated by his peers, something that would have crushed the old version of Haliburton and sent him spiraling into deeper self-doubt,
isn't emotional growth
or increased mental toughness. It's when someone learns to disconnect from external validation entirely, a defense mechanism that might protect him from further breakdown, but also disconnects him from the joy and passion that made him special in the first place.